Welcome one more day to Space in Harmonia. Today I bring a fascinating story that will not disappoint you if you are really interested in knowing why humanity is living in such a state of confusion, chaos, destruction, deception, why there are dark forces trying to conquer the human heart and mind, why the human heart has been sold out and torn into pieces. We have to know the characters in the play, which forces are helping, which forces are destroying us, why the human heart is so valuable, what do we have inside. And I'm making this video trying to answer questions coming from the Spanish-speaking world. Some people ask me about the connection between astrology, the Anagram, and the Symbiotic tree. And even last Saturday during the course I teach on harmonic therapy, harmonic alchemy, a person brought the theme of the connection between the so-called ancient gods and the Symbiotic tree, and before the class asked me to give her an idea of how that fits into the Symbiotic tree. So I show a diagram, which I will show to you as well. It's a very ancient diagram, and it's made of concentric circles, which are also called rings. And this is very interesting because there is a saga known as the Lord of the Rings, which gives many clues about all this. And you will see what I'm speaking about, but I have to give you some keys. Here you have an Aristotelian scheme of the universe. Scholars would say this is a primitive representation of the cosmos because the Earth is not in the center. Now you have to understand that the ancient wise men, philosophers, astronomers were just picking up a wisdom that came from primordial times, in which the view of the universe was even more expanded than now, because the perception was greater. And when this information came to certain philosophers, like Aristotle, for instance, it was incomplete. I don't think Aristotle understood this in depth. He was just gathering a view that came from the ancient world. And I was surprised to see this medieval representation because we have here the full tree of life with the 12 fruits. Here in the center we have the earth, which is logical in a sense because the center is wherever is our heart. The Holy One is living through us. Holy life is living through us, even trap life. So we can consider that the center of the universe is wherever we are. We live in the earth, so we put the earth in the center. It's our perspective. If we live in Venus, we would put Venus in the center. And this is known as the imbrication of cosmoses. In ancient times, different traditions usually represented the whole universe with an imbrication of spheres. And what we have here is the full tree of life. If you notice, the earth is in the center with water, air, and fire in the atmosphere. Then we have the moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, which are the visible celestial spheres or bodies. Then we would have the firmament, the so-called rakia in Genesis 1, where we place the zodiac, the 12 mashalim, the 12 zodiacal servants, which are somehow the last step before going into the crystal sea. Later on, you will see what that is, the crystal sphere. Then we have the primum mobile, the first mover, from which the movement of life and light is transmitted towards the rest of the spheres in our solar system. This doesn't mean there are no other systems you see here, how they knew there were other star systems. But as we are studying our octave, we represent from our perspective. So this is perfectly logical. And the last step, the 12th sphere, would be the so-called empyrean. In Greek, that means the sphere of the immortal fire, the fire which is pure ether, from which our immortal spirit comes, the spirit of those who have pure life inside. As it was said, pure spirit is life, is nous, pure intelligence, love. It's an act of contemplation. And some seeds of spirits are coming down through the ladder, Jacob's ladder, and they come to incarnate on earth with a mission. Now, what is taking place here is a purification, because there was a battle in ancient times, a cosmic war, because certain artisans, demiurges, fallen architects went outside the tree of life and they began to manipulate life. They developed civilizations that led to the destruction of different planets. They caused the destruction of solar systems, and our system is one of those systems. There was an utter destruction here. We can see that destruction even in Mars, and on the Earth is evident. Now, those were trapped in this sphere, under the moon. As we read in the book of Apocalypse, chapter 12, the old serpent, known as dragon, the deceiver of the world, the adversary, Satan, and even accuser, Diabolos, was cast down to the earth together with his messengers or angels, followers, the sons of Satan, as we read in the second book of Enoch. And this was done so that they didn't destroy the full tree of life in other parts. There was a sort of ring established. Now, having all this in mind, we can understand what is written in different ancient myths, even in modern sagas, such as The Lord of the Rings. I didn't read it, but I read the first words, and it was surprising for me to find a key, because as I was reading, I realized Tolkien was referring to the Tree of Life. Actually, if you notice, he says that 3 rings were given to the elf kings, 7 rings were given to the dwarves, 9 rings were given to the mortals, the humans, and 1 ring was given to the Dark Lord, the Lord that governs from the land of Mordor, from where an army of shadows conquers the Middle Earth. Now, all this resonated in my mind because it seems to be a clear reference to astrological relations, the Sephirot. The 3 rings, for instance, are associated with water, air, and fire, which are connected to 3 letters in the Sephirotic tree. But we can also think of the 3 rings as the invisible heavenly bodies, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, which cannot be seen. And we have to go to the unconscious to recover those energies, just as the elves remain in the immortal lands that are no longer visible for the human beings, immortal treasures hidden in our unconscious. Now, the 7 dwarfs can be a reference to the alchemical work, which is usually connected with the planets, the metals, and this work is done in the inside, the interior of the mountains. The dwarves were working inside the mountains in the Lord of the Rings. We also have the 7 dwarfs and Snow White. Where is your Snow White? We have to find her and wake her up, or even heal her, because she is our soul, which has been poisoned by certain apples full of deception. The apples of stepmother nature, as I call it. And we are receiving influences from all these spheres. Now, you notice there is a cosmic immune system, because this was not done just by chance. Some people think the intelligences that built up this structure are evil, and they say we are trapped on the earth by an evil god, but think that the dark beings cannot go past the sphere of the moon. That's, in my view, the ring of the Dark Lord. He's given this ring, only one ring, so he cannot go beyond this sphere. Therefore, Tolkien knew about this. Apparently, he was transmitting wisdom, which is also present in other mythologies. And those who have the immortal fire here on Earth have to protect it, especially human beings, which have 9 rings. So we have the 9 energies, and we are able to harmonize all the elements from the stars. Actually, we are the microcosmos of the macrocosmos. We have all the planets inside, all the stars inside. We are even born through a portal, and the problem is that we are ruled by the negative side of the stars, and we have to flip them up. We have to turn to the positive side, because stars and planets are not evil in themselves, but the radiation coming from them, it's turned into something poisonous through the influence of the electromagnetism of the moon. This is why when you go to the conventional Symbiotic trees, you also see the same configuration with the planets, the heavenly bodies associated with the Sephiroth. Here you have Malkuth associated with the Earth, Yesod with the Moon, Or with Mercury, Netzach with Venus, the Sun with Tifereth, Mars with Geburah, Jupiter with Chesed, mercy, Saturn with Binah, Uranus with wisdom, Chokmah, and Keter with Pluto. And this planet is connected to Plutos, the wealth which has been stolen by fallen forces, fallen entities. Human being had a crown, but he was deprived from his crown of life. So we have to take it back, submerging ourselves into the unconscious, so that negative forces don't rule our life. We have to be kings of our life with our true crown of life. Therefore, we also need Da'at Elyon, the true conscience, which is in the middle of Chokmah and Binah. Here we usually have that because, in my view, that would be conventional knowledge, or the knowledge that leads to the abyss, the rabbit hole, the confusion. Here we would put Neptune. The trident of Neptune is false wisdom, false understanding, and false knowledge. That's the trident of Poseidon, the trident of Neptune, gods which were associated with Atlantis. I even show how that relates to the 3 rings of Atlantis, which can be connected to the 3 rings mentioned by Tolkien. And it's very interesting to see how the elves were living in the immortal lands, but some of them fell under the influence of the Dark Lord, and they became orcs, the warriors from the shadows. And This is very interesting because there is something in us which can be perverted. We have all the energies, and when darkness takes over our soul in the middle, our middle earth, which is connected to the heart and the solar plexus, is somehow conquered by darkness. Satan establishes his throne in the solar plexus. You can even find the throne of Satan mentioned in the beginning of the book of the Apocalypse, speaking about the 7 congregations. So the alchemical work means turning to the positive side. The moon would be associated with laziness, inertia, but also with fertility, growth, because there is a vital energy which has electromagnetism and it can be used for protection. Then Mercury is connected to envy, but also with the analytical mind, the mind that gives us access to the structure of reality, the messenger of the gods, Hermes Trismegistus. Then Venus is connected to erotic passion, deception, desires, but we also need the force of emotions connected to elevated art, conscious art, the steward delegate, as I call it. Then we have the sun associated with pride, and pride can scorch us, but we also have an authentic self-love, recognizing our true being, our true splendor. Mars can be connected to rage, destruction, but also with the sword of determination, the sword of discernment. I didn't come to bring peace, but the sword, the Nazarene master said. So the Messiah brought the sword of discernment, the sword of the truth, so that we can be part of the collective body of the Messiah, which means anointed with understanding, the one that wears the true crown of life, which fills the missing gaps in the Symbiotic tree, completing the tree of life. Then in Hesed we have Jupiter, which is connected to gluttony, but also ambition, or even avarice, but also with generosity, creative expansion. Then we have Saturn connected to Assyria. It's a form of sadness, sorrow, lack of self-care, depression. Lead is the heavy metal associated with this planet. But Saturn is also a master of existence. We go through existence and learn certain lessons. We learn how to take our crown of life and exert our true will, which is divine, because it has been given to us by the primordial father. Then we have Uranus in Chokmah, the wisdom. Uranus is one of the invisible planets, and it's connected to vanity, perverted wisdom, but also with primordial humble wisdom. So it depends on which energy you are using. If you don't know yourself, you are going to fall into vanity. Then Pluto is connected to cowardice, the fear to be oneself, inability to take the crown, and therefore subjecting yourself to the powers of the dark, the other side of the force. We have to balance, harmonize the positive energies on the earth, Malkut. As I said, the moon is a sort of shield that deviates all those influences, but it does not mean the moon is evil. Actually, we know from ancient tales that the moon came from the earth. It was a fragment because of the impact of an asteroid, which is also the official theory. And even Tolkien, in his saga, speaks about how Melkor, a dark lord, destroyed one of the sources of light in the Immortal lands, 2 trees, the trees of Valinor. And he said these two trees became the sun and the moon. And this is very ancient. It's told in different traditions. We even have pictures of that. And Tolkien admitted he took that from old representations, the trees of the moon and the sun. And this is an alchemical allusion, the separation of essence and personality. When our personality is dissociated, it becomes the shadow, which in The Lord of the Rings is Gollum. And Gollum always whispers in the ear of Frodo, which is the ring bearer. There are 9 ring bearers. They have to travel to the land of Mordor, that is the land of death. So something has to die within ourselves along the journey. And in this journey, we always hear the whisper of Gollum, which is our fallen personality, which is somehow trying to make use of the fallen ring, the ring which is charged with the negative electromagnetism of the moon. Anyway, we shouldn't see our fallen personality or shadow as the main adversary, but rather as the potential to become what we are. We only have to illumine the shadow with the sun. You see, the earth is in the same path of conscience as the sun, the moon. And this is because our personality has to be illumined. And when we illumine our passions, fears, then these disappear. And they somehow give rise to the true personality. And then our elements of life return to what we are. And that's how we forge the soul, the divine soul, which is a combination of the immortal spirit and human life. So divine soul is the aspect of the tree of life that is somehow combining 2 worlds. It's establishing the middle between the 2 columns. So there is an amazing Kabbalistic understanding behind many of the ancient stories. And even in The Lord of the Rings, when Aragorn receives the crown from Gandalf, we see that union of 2 worlds, because the mission of Aragorn was not only to protect Frodo, to destroy the ring, but also to unite 2 worlds in order to marry his beloved, which is the daughter of one of the elf kings, Elrond. And I think this might be a perfect alchemical allegory of the formation and purification of the astral body, which would be a return to the original state of the Adam, which was an androgynous being. It combined masculine and feminine energies in the same proportion, and it was not divided. And this was also symbolized by a very famous alchemical image known as rebis. The rebis is a combination of 2 beings. Res in Latin means entity, consistent, or thing, and bis is twice. So something that has been made twice. We form the astral body from the physical body, and it has more or less the same appearance, but it can transcend physical matter. It looks younger. It can perform travels through space-time, and it would be the cocoon for the growth of the true immortal soul. And the art leading to all this would be represented by the magician, Gandalf, and also the one that puts the crown on Aragorn, because without becoming true magicians of our life, transforming the coarse into subtle, we cannot become the carriers of the crown of life. And some would say that the union of Aragorn and Arwen is the union of Aragorn with a sort of fairy or elf. Now that's a kind of dark twist, because we are not trying to marry our elf, we are trying to marry our true self, which goes beyond. The elves were beings coming from the astral realm, and some of them were trapped. They became the orcs, as in the Lord of the Rings. Even in Sumerian mythology, we are told about Enki, the Lord of the Earth, which gave the arts and sciences to humanity with the Promethean understanding, and some of those intelligences became Lucifer, Helel ben Shahar, the carrier of light that wanted to ascend beyond the stars. So they wanted to transcend the system, the spheres that we have seen, but they couldn't because there is a filter. You have to be humble. You have to harmonize all the energies, the 9 energies within. And the elves can't because they only have 3 rings: water, air, and fire. They have an astral nature. We have all natures: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. We have the 5 elements. And with them, we make the soul, the true immortal soul, not the astral daimonic soul, which is the one possessed by the elves and different types of entities. So we need to gestate the divine child within, which is not the child from the elves, but the child from the Holy One. And that's the true Messiah. The Messiah that comes to save something from humanity, something for which we need to build up an astral body that has an emotional stage and a mental stage. So we have the Christos, the Messiah, the Christos Jesus, which in Greek would mean that Messiah that has grown to the stage of kid that can walk with the mind of the Messiah. And then finally we would have the Jesus Christos, issue HaMashiach in Hebrew, Yoshua HaMashiach, which means the one which is fused fully with the Father, and he lives in the absolute heaven. Here we would have the true earth. The true earth, which in Hebrew is Tavel. Now, if you notice, before arriving to the true earth, there are 2 spheres, and one of them is the so-called crystal sea, the crystalline sphere. And it's very interesting to notice how this was mentioned in the book of the Apocalypse. For instance, in chapter 15, Apostle John sees those who conquer the beast, and they are standing on the crystal sea. And the crystal sea is where we see reality as it is. As Apostle Paul said, now we see as through a dark crystal. Our perception is darker, but it will come the time in which we will know as we were known. And this is as we were known here in the Empyreus, the absolute heaven in the emanation, where we have the true earth. But now we carry our experience from the earth, so we have the totality within ourselves. We are representatives of the totality, and therefore there are forces that are trying to protect ourselves. And this is why we have forces fighting on our side. Forces from the totality and even forces from nature. Both were known as Yud-Heh Tzevaot, which is associated with Netzach in this sphere right here, and then Elohim Tzevaot, which are the armies or forces of nature, some of which can go against us. They can fall because they are in the left column. And actually, some of the demiurges belong to that column, and they fell under the influence of the moon, the dark lord, which is also mentioned in Star Wars, by the way, the Death Star, that leads to a different tree. The other side of the tree is the so-called Sitriak Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because it has duality, it has no middle pillar. Therefore, we have to understand what is in play, and we have to take responsibility. We have to take responsibility for our crown of life, understanding how evil forces are trying to deceive people, making use of this wisdom, but turning it into the opposite. This is why some people think there is a sort of absolute evil God, evil universal demiurge ruling our universe, but that's not the case. All fallen entities are below the sphere of the moon. And some people say Yud-Heh is Enlil, but Yud-Heh in the Old Testament in Hebrew is a reference for the totality. Yud-Heh Elohim are the forces of the totality. Actually, there are Hebrew codes in the Bible where we can see how Enlil is the so-called Baal, the enemy of Yud-Heh Elohim. You can see it here, and it's very clear that the word Enlil is present, associated with Baal, and I counted the spaces, and it correlates perfectly. It's not just a coincidence. I leave the links down below, even though I cannot make myself responsible for all the codes. Some of them might be out of context in my view, but in this case I check it and I attest it's true. And the enemy of Yud-Heh Elohim is Baal, the Lord, which is the title usually mentioned in reference to Yud-Heh, and that's the confusion. Yud-Heh is not a lord. Lord is a title of dark lords, dark entities, because only slaves are connected to lords. Even the Messiah said, "Why you call me Lord, Lord, and you don't do what I do?" And he said that he calls his followers brothers, because the servants do not know what their Lord is doing, but we know what our true master is doing. So he is not our Lord. He is our brother and also our master, because he showed the way of how to shine with our crown of life, how we can become masters as well. Therefore, we have to take up our crown of life. And if you are more interested in all this, I can develop the following day the connection between the Anagram and the planets and the Symbiotic tree. If you notice, the Anagram is an harmonic configuration. 9 would correspond with Si, Do. Re would correspond with the moon, Regina Caelis. Mi with Mercury. 3 is the interval between Mi and Fa. Fa, Sol. La is 7. Si is 8. Here we have another interval. I was explaining all this in previous videos. You will have more information in the links below. And notice how Rodney Collin, which is the astrologer that made this configuration, established the feminine heavenly bodies on the right, Moon, Mercury, and Venus, and the masculine heavenly bodies on the left, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. And they are pairs. The Moon goes with Saturn, Mercury with Jupiter, Venus with Mars. And this is because the Moon rules Cancer, which is the opposite sign to Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. And we find that correlation all over. Then we have the 3 invisible planets, Uranus, Neptune, Mercury, which are the higher octave. And this is why Rodney Collin put Uranus in the Do. Uranus is the higher octave of Aquarius, which is ruled also by Saturn. But this is a subject that I can expand if you are interested. This is connected to the personalities, the 9 types of personalities that I showed in the previous video. And we also have lunar personalities, Mercurial personalities, Venusian personalities, Martial personalities, and so on. Anyway, I think for now is enough. You can make questions if you wish, and also have clear who you are and for whom you are working. You are working not only for yourself, but also for the collectivity of beings that belong to the tree of life, with the help of all the virtues given to us by the Holy One. When we stand in our true position, nothing can conquer us, not even the greatest deception, because we can pinpoint the lies. And there are many lies that have to be uncovered, because nowadays this wisdom is being used in the opposite way to deceive people, even in movies and sagas. There is also deception in books that are very popular. Therefore, we have to show this openly without fear, because we also have protection. Protection comes from fulfilling our predestination and being flourishing as the tree of life that is hidden with us. So thank you very much for listening. Remember, this is a bilingual channel. I publish in Spanish and English. And let's keep cleaning the mind and the heart with the 9 energies so that we can flourish with the 12 fruits, expressing the Holy One, the hidden 13, which is somehow protecting us, moving us to grow, expressing the infinite love and modified life, integral conscience, and deep, blissful serenity.